The Cuban Proxy War by Lucas, Lena, and Duncan.
The Cuban Proxy War involved three countries, the USA, Cuba, and Soviet Union.
In the Cuban Proxy War, the notable people were Fidel Castro and Fulgencio Batista. Fidel Castro improved the economy, literacy rates, healthcare, and conditions for women. He was the governor, or he governed the Republic of Cuba. He accepted the deal with Batista to have the Soviets send missile sites to Cuba. The missile sites were 9 miles from the U.S. Fulgencio Batista was a former president of Cuba. He was a leader during the revolution, and there was envy of who had more control between Fidel Castro and Fulgencio Batista. And these two worked together to make the deal with the Soviets to send the missiles into Cuba.
The Bay of Pig conflict. The conflict was an attempt to overthrow the Cuban government led by Fidel Castro. In the Bay of Pig conflict, the U.S. trained exiled Cuban citizens lead the invasion in an attempt to hide the U.S. involvement. The invasion failed due to mistakes made by the U.S. 1,200 exiled Cuban citizens were then surrendered to the Cuban army. All prisoners were traded for baby food and medicine.
Revolution. The conflict started between Bastia and Fidel because of Bastia's power growth. Fidel failed on attacking the Mataca barracks and was captured. During Fidel's trial, he turned the attention to the power grab of Bastia and became a figure for the people. Fidel and Raul Castro were released in 1955 and went to Mexico to regroup. The 26th of July movement. Castro returned to Cuba and gained support for his movement. By 1958, Castro had secured victory and Bastia fled.
The result in the Cuban Proxy War was the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Soviets delivered nuclear weapons to Cuba. This added nuclear sites, and these sites were 9 miles from the U.S. ground, particularly Florida. The missile could target Salt Lake City, and that's how far it could go, as you can see in the bottom right photo. President Eisenhower ordered an embargo with Cuba. In the picture on the bottom right, that's an embargo. If you really look, there are dotted lines, and that's just like a barrier of like an isolation on just Cuba. And then when JFK was elected, he approved an anti-Castro, which was elite forces. He hired elite forces to do the job, and he refused U.S. planes to fly over Cuba. And then the CIA planned an invasion on Cuba to get like rid of the sites. And then lastly, today, the United States and Cuba are not allies. And lastly, this is our bibliography.